This lecture covers the elements and principles of design. These are the building blocks of most of your visual design elements that you're going to encounter. But also if you take the elements and principles of design and you apply them towards some of the other arts, literature, poetry, music, etc., you'll find that they're all quite applicable. Now in the lecture what I do is I break them down individually and I give you several examples of application of the particular elements or principles. Keep in mind that on the surface they're very straightforward and very simplistic, but if you kind of take them further, they actually can address quite complex situations in both composition and content. To be clear, these are the nuts and bolts of all art making, and you should apply these to every single piece you do. They will make sure your pieces are dynamic and exciting. Line is a continuous mark made on a surface or the edge created when two shapes meet. May be actual, implied, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, and or contour. In these images you can see some of the fundamental uses of line just to create or build an image. But line is not necessarily just a drawn line, it can be the way things line up. It can be repetitive elements that suggest the idea of a line. So when you're looking at what line is, interpret it widely. There's the drawn line that you're seeing in some of these drawings, as Picasso here, and the type of line that's used in here. But for the most part, line can be just lining up things in a particular direction. Shape and form is a self-contained defined area, either geometric or organic. Shape refers to a two-dimensional element with an area on a plane, while form refers to a three-dimensional element with volume and space. So a shape can be simple and straightforward, or it can be a shape within a shape, or it can be a combination of shapes that make up another shape. Also, you should realize that some shapes imply other shapes based on our Freudian environment developed in the 20th century. Size refers to the relationship of the area occupied by one shape to that of another. You can see in this painting how the size of the apple dwarfs the size of the room, and it really is just a sense of playing one scale against the next. Here you see the sort of juxtaposition of a foreground background in terms of scale, and here you have the massive scale of the elephant on stilts being accented by the little tiny character. Space is the distance or area around or between elements in a work. Space is a very important consideration in design. You know, in Edward Hopper's The Diner that you probably know, that space increases a sense of loneliness in the piece. The spacing can make you feel claustrophobic or at ease depending on how compressed it is. In Max Beckmann's German expressionist masterpiece, he uses a claustrophobic space to kind of emphasize the uncomfortable feeling that is going on behind the scenes in society and to address the ideas of the concentration camp without being overt. Color is the visible spectrum of radiation reflected from an object. Color is also sometimes referred to as hue. Color can be used in a range of ways in a design. It can be used to emphasize things, to create an intense emotion, or to calm things down. Sometimes it's juxtaposed with the subject matter, a soft, happy color opposed with a negative subject. Franz Marc's use of color hints that something isn't right because it separates from reality. Kehinde Wiley uses highly contrasting colors to kind of emphasize the subject matter amongst a very intricate pattern in the background. Value refers to how light or dark an object, area, or element is independent of its color. Value is also sometimes referred to as tone. So on the surface, value is just about lights and darks, the relative saturation of colors and so on. But value can also refer to the overall contrast or drama created in a scene. Texture is the surface quality of a shape or how it appears to feel. Rough, smooth, spiky, soft, hard and glossy, etc. Texture can be real or implied. So think of texture not only as that rough sort of surface or the smooth surface, but think about how lines create a feel to a piece, where some passages are rough and have this activity, this texture going on, and other areas may be calmer or quieter. So the texture can be physical. It can be actual physical paint on the surface, or it can just be marks that create a sense of depth. So the principles of design, this is where it all happens. You use the elements of design in various combinations to create the principles. Emphasis is created by visually reinforcing something we want the viewer to pay attention to. This is often used to train the viewer's eyes on the center of interest or a focal point, the area of interest the viewer's eye naturally, instinctively skips to. It's easiest to create emphasis in the center as that's where our eye naturally goes, but by using color, form, line strategically, you can create an emphasis in different areas of a particular work of art. In this Banksy, the bicycle is tied to the post and connects visually to the actual image on the wall. Balance is the distribution of interest or visual weight in a work. A balanced work will have all the elements arranged such that a work will have a sense of visual equilibrium or stability. Balance can be symmetrical, asymmetrical, or radial. Objects, values, colors, textures, shapes, etc. can be used in creating a balanced composition. Distributing your visual elements around a center axis can be the easiest way to achieve balance in your piece, but it's certainly not the most interesting. It's very predictable. Less predictable is an asymmetrical balance, which can be a little harder to achieve, but has a stronger visual resonance. Contrast is the juxtaposition of opposing elements, opposite colors, value, light, dark, direction, horizontal, vertical. The greater the contrast, the more something will stand out and call attention to itself. Contrast can be associated with value, basically one of the elements of design, but moreover it has to do with the contrast of ideas and images as well as colors and lights and darks. Repetition of elements in a regular or cyclic fashion creates interest. Repetition strengthens a design by tying together individual elements and bringing a sense of consistency. It can create rhythm, regular, alternating, flowing, random, progressive, and patterns. Variation introduced to repetition increases the level of interest. Repetition is always present, from repeated brush marks or pencil lines to elements that are repeated throughout the design. It's a great way to create a sense of movement, also to transition an element from one shape into another, but it's definitely something that will kind of create a rhythm or a feel or a flow in your pieces. So a very important thing to consider in your work. This is a Murakami. Movement is a visual flow through the composition. In some works, movement is implied by the use of static elements to suggest motion and direct the viewer's eye along a path through the work. In a still image, aspects such as lines, diagonals, unbalanced elements, placement, and orientation can play a role of active elements. In others, movement can be real, giving some elements the ability to be moved or move on their own. I can't overemphasize the importance of movement in your piece. Nothing seems less interesting to look at than a piece that is very static. Movement gives a lot of energy to your work. It'll keep the eye engaged in the work so that once you look through the piece and see the movement, you go back and you start again. It's a very powerful principle. Harmony brings together a composition with similar related elements, adjacent colors, similar shapes, etc. Harmonious elements have a logical relationship, connection, alignment, or progression. They work together and they complement each other. So visual harmony is important in a piece, but sometimes your goal is not to create a harmonious sort of effect. And you can kind of flip that and create a relative sense of chaos as well, depending on your subject matter. Again, Max Beckmann in the German Expressionist period creates chaos in most of his pieces to emphasize the chaos in society. Unity is created by using harmonious, similarity, and repetition, continuance, proximity, and alignment. It is the visual linking of various elements of the work. This allows the disparate elements and principles to create a unified whole that can be greater than the sum of its parts. Unity can be achieved in a range of ways, but often when we're using a full palette of a range of kind of colors that may not go together well, we can encapsulate them within a form. That form holds that palette together as separate from the form around it and creates a unity in the piece.